YouTube, what's going on? Kevin the Tech Ninja here. Today we have the brand new iPhone 11 from Apple, and I just did a video on that too, so make sure you check it out down below. But we're also going to compare it to the OnePlus 7T. Now, both of these phones are going to target similar audiences when it comes to the price. We're looking at a mid-tier flagship price. The OnePlus 7T, however, is only $599 compared to the iPhone 11 starting at $700. Now, of course, you're gonna pay a premium for anything Apple related as far as to get into the ecosystem, and you're paying for the experience and all those extra things, while OnePlus strips away a lot of that stuff and give you just a really great phone. So I'm excited to see how these two phones pair up. You wanna know what I think? Well, let's talk about it. So if you have these phones side by side, the difference does come in size. The OnePlus 7T is taller than the iPhone 11, but that's mostly it. Now, if you do want to look at a spec sheet, the OnePlus 7T is also thinner, but in the hand, it is not noticeable at all. Both phones also do not have a headphone jack or expandable storage, but they both have a power button and also volume buttons, and then you have this toggle buttons that you can adjust your notifications with. In the hand as well, both of these phones feel premium. Both of these phones are made from metal and glass, although Apple doesn't tell you the type of glass is made from. The OnePlus is made from Gorilla Glass. The iPhone is officially water resistant rating at IP68, whereas OnePlus doesn't certify their phones at all. Although we've seen tests online where, they submerge in the water, it seems to be fine, but they do not get the certification for it. Either way, don't plan on submerging your phone in the water at all and expecting it to survive. Although the iPhone does have the water resistant rating, it is something to note that the phone does not cover water damage. So even if you drop your phone in water and it gets water damage, it is not covered by your just standard warranty. So on the OnePlus, you have a 6.55-inch Fluid AMOLED Full HD Plus display, and you also have 90 Hz refresh rate. You compare that to the iPhone 11, which is a 6.1-inch IPS LC display with just over 720p resolution. Now, obviously, just looking at specs, you're gonna say the OnePlus 7 has a better screen, and yeah, actually it does. The higher resolution definitely does come into play when watching content, and also in the hand, just reading text, anything like that, it's gonna be much more crisp on a higher resolution screen. And then you talk about 90 Hertz, everything just looks to be a whole lot smoother when scrolling and when just actually doing pretty much anything on the phone. Both phones also do have dual speakers, where the iPhone I do find is just a little bit crisper, where the OnePlus may get louder. I think the iPhone, even at higher volume, sounds better, but maybe doesn't get as loud. Now, speaking of that, when you're watching content, I do find the teardrop style on display to be way much more immersive than the notch on the iPhone 11. Now, the iPhone 11 does have a notch because of Face ID, and although I do love Face ID, it does sort of get in the way when trying to consume content. The OnePlus has a in-screen fingerprint scanner, and it actually works pretty good. It's better than the first iterations of it. I love just tapping my finger down and unlocking the phone. It seems very futuristic, whereas Face ID, we've seen it before. Although it's very good, it doesn't have that same futuristic feel. So as far as applications supporting it on iOS, if your application supports authentication, it's going to support biometrics, whether it's finger with the old phone or your Face ID. Whereas on Android, it's all over the place. Some of my banking apps doesn't support the finger for the OnePlus 7T at all, and I'm here typing in a password, and I sort of feel that's ridiculous since I have authentication on the phone. And this is not just a OnePlus issue, this is a global Android issue. Depending on what phone you have, it may or may not support that type of authentication. With Samsung, you have this face to unlock, or you have the retina scans, and none of my phones supported that. So that's just something to be mindful of when you have an Android phone with authentication. You may still have to type in passwords. Now let's talk about what's under the hood. Let's talk about the engine of these devices. Apple has an A13 Bionic chip with 4 GB of RAM on the iPhone 11. And you compare that to the Qualcomm Snapdragon 855 Plus with 8 GB of RAM. Neither phone has a micro SD SD card slots, but the OnePlus does give you a default of 128GB on board of storage, and you also have UFS 3.0 configuration compared to the iPhone 11 storage starting at still 64GB. Now for me, when talking about this category, obviously you're looking at an iPhone with 64GB of memory, and then you add $50, then you get to 128, and already it's a more expensive phone by $100, so now it's a more expensive phone by $150. That's something to think about, whereas the OnePlus just comes out of the box ready to go with 128. So at the end of the day, internal specifications only go a long way in telling you how good a phone is, and way more often it is software that makes or breaks a device. So for OnePlus, it's Oxygen OS 10. We know all about Oxygen OS. It's just a lighter version of Android, and it runs great. And it's the closest thing to stock that you'll find, and some will argue, including myself, that it's better than stock Android. With the iPhone, you get iOS 13. And look, I am an iPhone user. I'm not going to obviously lie about that, but iOS 13 is a lot better than 12, as it should be, but at the end of the day, it doesn't have the same customization as Android, and I deeply do miss that. Of course, with iOS, some apps are just built better overall, and you get a more variety of apps, but on Android, you can customize the experience to make it work the way you want. iOS, you have icons sprawled all over the screen, and you have to tuck them in folders and do all sorts of stuff. Where on Android, you have a beautiful app drawer. So to each his own as far as OS, which one do you like the best? Which one is your experience? But you can't change it, so you're pretty much stuck with what you have. Now, both phones are gonna give you some insane performance no matter what you're looking at. The extra 90 Hz display just gives you a much smoother experience on the OnePlus than the iPhone 11. The iPhone 11 is not a slow phone. It's actually a very fast phone, but the 90 Hz screen just makes things feel smoother. Although it may not be smoother, it feels smoother, and it feeling a certain way is good enough to say it is that way, because how you feel is basically what you're going to experience. If you're going to talk about some multitasking or some really hardcore apps, then you're going to find that OnePlus with more RAM is actually better at switching between apps. And a lot of the software optimization that OnePlus gives you, it just makes it a better experience overall, and you can make it the way you exactly want. Whereas the iPhone just is the way it is, and it's loved by millions of people, so that's not a bad thing too. Now, as far as games, you're gonna have pretty much the same experience. Now, when doing some speed tests, I did find the OnePlus may load into games faster, but the experience of gaming is relatively the same. I did find, however, some games are optimized better for iOS than Android when comparing the same games side by side, but games that are created equally, they run just as fine on both devices. Now, OnePlus does give you a game mode, which allows you to further your customization when gaming, do things like reject calls automatically and record your gaming sessions, whereas the iPhone doesn't have anything like that. So for hardcore gamers, maybe an Android phone like the OnePlus will be better for you, although you have to look at the app selection, the gaming selection, to see if the game you want is on Android. There's another big change with the cameras on both of these phones. The OnePlus has a triple camera setup, and we're talking 48 megapixels, 12 megapixels, and 16 megapixels with 2x optical zoom and OIS. On the iPhone, there's a dual 12 megapixel setup with OIS, but no 2x optical zoom. In day-to-day photos, I feel that OnePlus is extremely passable. They're high contrasty, may not look super realistic, but on social media, I think they look fine. If you're gonna use Instagram and throw a filter over it anyways, I think the OnePlus gets you in the right direction, whereas the iPhone actually may be the best camera on mobile, period. Now, both of the phones can record 4K video up to 60 frames per second, but overall, I find the stability and colors on the iPhone is where it stands out. OnePlus, you get sort of a warping effect to video, which I don't really find on the iPhone. So what I mean by warping with OnePlus, when you're moving really fast, sometimes it warps to sort of stabilize, whereas the iPhone just does a better job at not seeing the warp. Now, both phones also can do ultra wide video, although once again, the iPhone does a consistently better job. Now, switching over to the front, the OnePlus does have a 16 megapixel shooter in the front, where the iPhone only has 12 megapixels. And I think both cameras do pretty good for a front facing camera, but but same thing as you see on the back. Although the OnePlus may be more flexible as far as different focal lengths, I think the iPhone just overall takes a better shot. Both phones also have a night mode shooting mode, so this allows you to take a picture at night, it exposes it multiple times, and you get a better shot. So here are two quick examples. I felt OnePlus did a better job overall with the handling of noise in these examples, but of course your miles may vary. And overall, both of them did a pretty good job, but OnePlus performed better for me in extreme low light. But I did find that iPhone preserved details better, so it really depends on what you're looking for out of these low light cameras. Let's go over to battery, and surprisingly enough, OnePlus wins this battle. It has a huge 3800 milliamp battery with a 30-watt warp charging technology brick built in. Look, the iPhone's not bad. It has a 3110 milliamp battery, but it doesn't come with a fast charging brick. So you're charging a lot longer than you would with the OnePlus. Actually, I had to look it up, and I had to look up 3 different sources because I didn't believe it. It has a 5-watt compared to a 30-watt charger. So Apple's giving you this tiny wattage, and your experience as far as charging the phone will be a little bit slower. iPhone does have wireless charging, OnePlus does not. So that's a couple extra points to iPhone there. I did find day to day that the OnePlus 7T just gave me better battery life throughout the whole day. At night, I had around 35 to 40% of battery left, where on the iPhone, I was down to around 25% to sometimes 28% depending on usage. And this was consistent during my week or so of testing both of these phones. I'd say given the price tag at $599, the OnePlus 7T will be the ideal choice for most people. I think Apple did a lot of great things with the iPhone 11, and it really does impress me. But when you compare these two phones head to head, and you are operating system agnostic where you don't care which one you use, you can't say the OnePlus 7T is just not a better phone overall. But some things like camera to consider, or some things like iMessage and that whole ecosystem experience, then of course you're gonna have to go Apple for those things. Anyways guys, that was my thought, that was my comparison. I wanna know what you think. Sound off down below. My name is Kevin the Tech Ninja. Have a great day. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.